This is the story of my brother Wayne and the Johnny Fair brand syrup incident. I say that up front because that's our final story destination. First, though, we need to take a little detour that will serve to punctuate the seriousness with which Wayne approached the subject of food and its proper and regular consumption. In 1946, in Wilton, Arkansas, we were a family of 7 kids, a mom, a dad, and an occasional visiting aunt, uncle, or grandma. I am sure that maintaining a supply of food for the table was a constant challenge for our parents, but they seemed up to it. We always had a few fresh garden vegetables and some kind of meat. What we didn't have was leftovers. If there was a shortage of anything, it was eggs. The few chickens we had could not always maintain the production schedule required to meet the demands of breakfast at the pools. Those of us on the younger end of the pool food chain recognized those slack production times only by the application of the half-egg rule. In those lean egg days, we had to make do at breakfast, only a half an egg for us younger kids. Mom, Dad, and oldest brother Jay got a whole egg. Jay got a whole because he was working at the mill with Dad. No one ever thought to dispute these rules of rationing. That's just the way things were. That didn't mean you had to like it. The silence on the subject was broken one fair morning when Wes had John William Hollowell as an overnight guest. As Mama offered the platter of fried eggs to be passed around the table, in the spirit of Southern hospitality toward a guest, she handed it straight to John William. John, who was accustomed to having a 2-egg breakfast at his house, exhibited a little mannerly reserve as he slid a single over-easy egg onto his waiting empty plate. The inrush of air around the table was signal enough to John William that he had unintentionally breached some sort of pool family rule of etiquette. He just didn't know what rule he had managed to violate. As he looked into the horrified faces all around the table, he meekly uttered, "What?" His question drew an immediate and spirited response as Wayne yelled at the top of his lungs, "Mama, he took a whole egg!" Mama, of course, moved swiftly to dispel the fast-growing uprising. She took the platter of remaining eggs, stirred them up, and rationed out equal portions to the rebels, who could see that they had somehow come out with more egg than usual. I suspected that she had, in fact, included her own portion with the rest, leaving none for her. She was like that. Now that we have established how serious that Wayne was about food, and that he may have had reason to carry a vendetta for a certain whole egg grabber, we can continue with this syrupy tale. Even though the school system at Wilton provided only for the first 8 grades, the whole system was in one big building. A major feature of the building was its very large auditorium. Because of its size, an occasional special event was staged there. On one cool October evening in 1946, such an event came to town and to the old schoolhouse. What happened that night made Johnny Fair syrup forever after a magical household word in the Poole family. Red Sovine, a country and western singing star of the Louisiana Hayride radio show, was performing at the Wilton School Auditorium. Red Sovine's primary radio show sponsor was the Johnny Fair Syrup Company. The sponsor also directly involved in the live road shows, like the one happening this very night. The entire Poole family went to the show. Sort of like at church, we just about took up an entire row. The show was great. Genuine celebrities live on stage, telling jokes, singing, and playing music. What a thrill it was for everybody there. At some point in the show, there came time for the musicians to take a break. None of us knew what was to come next. It was all so new and so exciting. Every sound or movement on stage was watched and scrutinized by the hungry audience. What next? What grand offering of entertainment will they offer up next? Red Sovine walked up to a foreground microphone and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, the band will be taking a little break." Then, before the disappointment could build in the audience, he continued, "Please keep your seats while we get ready for our Johnny Fair syrup eating contest. We are going to need some volunteers to enter the contest. So any of you kids that want to enter, come on down to the edge of the stage and we'll pick our contestants." Mama was about to ask Wes, Wayne, and Richard if they wanted to go down, but she was looking at empty seats. They were already making dust clouds on the way to the stage area. "Pick me!" pleaded a couple of dozen voices all at once. To speed things up, and since he was only needing 5 players, Mr. Sovine started pointing at biggest, most visible kids. Maybe his logic was that big kids would make a big showing of how great the syrup was. Having picked 3 solid contestants, Mr. Sovine scanned the group and picked a 4th. Wayne looked to see who it was. The 4th player was John William Hollowell. Wayne was on Leon's shoulders and just a hootin' and a hollerin' for all he was worth. Hello, buddy. Thank you. Don't knock my papers over. Wayne was on Leon's shoulders and just a hootin' and hollerin' for all he was worth. Had he been able to manage it, he likely would have attempted to stand right on top of Leon's head, so anxious to attain the still open position of participant number 5. Mr. Sovine apparently decided to lean to the side of showmanship and picked the scrawny little kid that was screeching louder and louder and definitely showing more desire than all the rest. "You, kid, are number 5. Wayne made it to the stage in one leap as Leon, left to deal with the recoil of the little spring that just sprang, tumbled backwards to the floor. It was comic relief enough to cause the remaining now non-participants to graciously return to their seats. "Okay, here are the rules," announced an assistant to Mr. Sovine. "A server will place a slice of bread on the plate in front of each contestant. The server will then pour a goodly portion of Johnny Fair syrup over the slice of bread. The contestant must eat the entire syrup-laden slice of bread. The server will continue to replace the bread and syrup until we have one contestant continuing to eat. Does everyone understand the rules?" "Yes," came the 5 responses in unison. As the rules were being dispensed with, another person was collecting the names and something personal about each contestant. Wayne looked quickly down the row of chairs at the competition as they were introduced to the audience, who pretty much already knew them. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention," Mr. Sovine said, returning to the microphone. "Please allow me to introduce to you our fine bunch of contestants who will be participating tonight in your Red Sovine's Louisiana Hayride Johnny Fair Syrup Eating Contest. In chair number 1, we have Scotty Hedgecock. Scotty's folks run the combination Texaco gas station and post office. In chair number 2, we have Herschel Hattridge. It says here, Herschel once ate a 20-pound watermelon in one sitting. In chair number 3, we have a local favorite. Let's hear it for Leon Warren. The Warren family was well represented in the house, and Red's invitation was met with a thunderous, foot-stomping round of applause for Leon. In chair number 4, please welcome John Hollowell, ladies and gentlemen. No one knows who John Hollowell is, but as soon as they look at the 4th chair, everybody knows it's John William, not just John. At this point, Mr. Sovine turned his attention towards chair number 5. He looked right into Wayne's eyes, quickly surveyed his small frame, and then he looked back at his notes. Almost apologetically, he introduced Wayne as the last contestant. "Ladies and gentlemen, our 5th and last contestant is Wayne Poole." The introduction was completed so quickly there wasn't any time for the same audience recognition afforded the other contestants. Mr. Sovine turned to Wayne, who was trying his best to sit tall in the folding chair assigned to him. "Well, son, at least you'll get a free meal out of it." Mr. Sovine was now second-guessing his own decision to have picked Wayne in the first place. Coincidentally, first place was exactly what was on Wayne's devious little mind. He figured to win this contest and avenge the embarrassment of the recent half-egg incident all in one sweep. In just a moment, folks, we'll get this contest going. But first, let me tell you about this fine product which has sponsored our visit to your fine city of Wilton tonight. Mr. Sovine continued extolling the virtues of Johnny Fair syrup until finally even he became aware of the restlessness building up in the audience, not to mention in the fidgety line-up of boys who were pumped up for some syrup sopping, and they were beyond ready to commence. "Okay, folks, what do you say we get this thing started?" he said at last. Wayne shifted in his chair. He raised himself up and sort of sat on his knees and rocked backward and forward in anticipation of the starter's signal. The complete set of rules recited earlier included the specific requirement that each contestant must use only the fork provided by each plate to convey the syrup-laden bread to the mouth. Wayne gripped his assigned fork in his right hand, and then he put his left hand just to the side of his waiting plate. He leaned slightly forward to put a little weight to that elbow, making an anchor. This tactic served two purposes. It would keep the folding card table playing surface steady, and also it would provide a bit of a blind so that the other players who were all to his left could not gauge how well he was doing. "Okay, helpers, put down the first slice of bread and cover it with good old Johnny Fair," said Red, unable to discontinue the sales pitch. "Now, boys, wait for my signal. You have to wait until I say go before you start." He kept talking even as the crowd started hollering and cheering for their own favorite contestant. Red continued, "Remember, you have to wait till I say go." Now, at this point, Leon, who thought he understood the rules, reacted when he heard the word go. He went. He had half a slice of bread down his throat before Mr. Sovine yelled, "Whoa, number 3, it ain't time yet." Leon stopped in mid-chew with syrup running down his chin and looked up to find the entire audience whooping and hollering at his expense. "We can't count that slice," said Red. Leon settled back down and resolved this time to wait until someone else started before joining in himself. "Okay now, ready, set, go," said Mr. Sovine, and with that the syrup-sopping sacrifice began. 1 slice, 2, 3, then 4. Scotty was leaning back in his chair. With slice number 5, Scotty was done. 4 contestants were left. Herschel Hatridge was cutting 2 squares of bread and single forking them to save time, passing the sugary wet morsels to his mouth. On one such trip to the mouth, a square of bread dislodged and fell, but being quick with his hands, he caught it in midair and stuffed it behind the other piece without the aid of the fork. His helper, Judge, tapped him on the shoulder to let him know he was out. 3 contestants left. Leon, John William, and Wayne were battling slice for slice, sop for sop. The crowd was going nuts. Most everyone was standing up by now as they screamed encouragement by way of decibel measure for the remaining 3. Red Sovine was now surprised to see Wayne still in the thick of it. Slice number 7, then 8, Leon was faltering. He looked to his cheering section for encouragement. That was his big mistake. Just as he spotted his supporters in the audience, he sucked wind and got choked on a sticky piece of bread. Leon wheezed and sputtered. He got up from his chair and staggered toward the front of the stage, waving his hands violently. His family of supporters had worked their way to the edge of the stage to better urge Leon on. Before Leon could cover his face or otherwise minimize the effect of the inevitable eruption that was coming, he offered up a tremendous cough, a sneeze, or some combination of the two. The net effect was a syrupy spraying of most of his family. A big chunk of wet bread hit his little brother Jackie right between the eyes. Asleep in the safety of his mother's arms up to now, this was Jackie's signal to join in the noisy admonition of Brother Leon, who just got kicked out of the contest for leaving the playing area. Now it was down to 2 players. There was big old John William Hollowell, and there was little old Wayne Poole. The images this scene provided of a David and Goliath situation was not lost on the audience. With only 2 contestants to choose from, the house quickly became divided into 2 cheering camps. The 2 boys were up to their 9th slice. Wayne was tiring of cutting up pieces and passing them to his mouth. He had devised a plan to speed up the process. He had to take care, though, not to repeat Herschel Hatridge's mistake of drop and catch. He would implement the new technique on the next slice. Slice number 10 was placed on the respective combatant's plate and covered over with syrup. Before the syrup could soak in, Wayne pierced the end of one corner of the slice, then rolled it up into a cylinder. Very carefully, without touching the bread with his fingers, he pierced the bread a second time to lock it onto the fork. He very carefully lifted the entire thing to his mouth and munched on it like an ice cream cone until it was gone. He was rolling up slice number 11 when John William had managed to finish his number 10. He looked at what Wayne was doing and looked at the slice number 11 that was just receiving a layer of Johnny Fair on his own plate. He raised his hands in the air and said, "I give." The house went wild. The little guy that barely could reach the table had put 4 big boys under it. Wayne was not taking any chances about the contest being over, and so he downed number 11, just like he did number 10. He was going for number 12 when Red Sovine stepped in to call a halt to the contest and proclaim Wayne the undisputed champion Johnny Fair syrup eater. Wayne's prize was a quart jar of Johnny Fair syrup. More than that, though, his feat remains a family legend, and he is still an example to all that sometimes dynamite does come in small packages.